for communication arts majors with concentration in journalism, as well as Emmanuel Marcoux, who is a freshman philosophy and political science major. As you all see in the handout, there will be opening statements, which will be 6 minutes each. Each presenter will have 6 minutes to open with the arguments that they progress. We'll then have an open floor, at which point anybody from the crowd will have 3 minutes to speak, have whatever they want to say. Then we'll have rebuttals, which will be 4 minutes from each side. And then cross-examinations. Cross-examinations will have 2 pairs from both sides, each talking just back and forth, however they see fit, for 3 minutes each. And then closing statements from each side. That will be 5. So with that being said, I'd like to invite Monarchy side for our first opening statement.
First, I'd like to thank the Veritas Society and the presenters for hosting this debate. For unto us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulders. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we are here to debate which system of government is more Catholic, the Federal Democratic Republic or the Ultramontanist Monarchy. To do this, we need to know 2 things. First, what is the purpose of the Catholic Church? And second, what is the purpose of government? The first one is easy to answer. The purpose of the Catholic Church is to lead souls to the heavenly kingdom. The purpose of the government is twofold. One is to protect the common good, and the second is to lead to divine good. To sum it up, the purpose of the church is to lead souls to God, and the purpose of the state is to lead souls to the church. If a government fails to do this, then it is not a good government. If a government is to achieve its end, it must fulfill 5 principles as laid out in Catholic political theology. First is recognition of Jesus Christ as the ultimate authority. Second is recognition of the Catholic Church as the deposit of grace. Third is the unity of the government. Fourth is protection of local liberties and rights. And 5 is protecting the common good and justice. The Ultramontane, we can briefly summarize these as the Christ, the altar, the throne, subsidiarity, and solidarity. Our system of government, the Ultramontane Monarchy, fulfills these 5 principles better than that of the Federal Democratic Republic. Let's start with the Christ. There's a reason that we call Jesus the King of Kings and not the President of Presidents. Why is that? Because kingship automatically denotes divine authority and sovereignty. Already, our system of government, the monarchy, portrays the true nature of authority better than the Federal Democratic Republic, as the Bible states all authorities from God. In the presidency, you see the president claiming, from the beginning to end, that his power is by the people, from the people, and can be taken away from the people. In the Ultramontane system, the king is crowned, chrismated, and consecrated by the Pope or his bishop and to lead the nation. So our end, the Pope and the Church, gets the authority from God. The state gets authority from the Church or from God. We already know that. Second, we have the altar. The Church has stated throughout her entire history, we all agree with, that faith and morals, the Church is the final arbitrator of, but politics are intrinsically tied to both. No matter how many times we hear about separation of church and state, it's never going to happen. Now, what is this? Simply put, humans aren't made that way. And the Catholic Church condemns that view. The state must recognize the Catholic Church as the true religion. That is a fact. And our system already does this once again better than the Republic because our system of government, the Ultramontane Monarchy, is built on that foundation. The king does not need the consent of only the people, but of the church herself. Third, we have unity. In order for a nation to survive and thrive, it must be unified. As our Lord says, a house divided against itself cannot stand. In the separation of powers of the Federal Democratic Republic, we see powers battling for each other. In the Ultramontane system, the king has absolute authority over the state and is only overridden by the Pope. As St. Thomas Aquinas says in Summa Contra Gentiles, if there is to be a government, it is better for it to be governed by one. For unity is better assured by one than by many. Fourth, we have the principle of subsidiarity. I'm going to summarize this principle briefly as, if something can be done at the local level, then keep it at the local level. The Catholic Church already does this. The Pope has absolute authority over all the church, yet parishes and dioceses are mostly self-autonomous. The Pope only steps in when he deems it necessary. And for most of the history of Christendom, the kings have done this too. respecting the local rights and liberties of their provinces, except notorious heresy and blasphemy. So already we see our system of government, the Montaigne monarchy, ultramontane monarchy fulfills this better. Again, absolute authority at the top, only acting on the local rights when necessary. Finally, we have solidarity. I'm going to summarize this in an analogy. Let's say in the family structure, you had a new father elected every 4 years. You had a group of potential fathers, and the children got to elect one. The potential fathers promised many things to the children, whether it's candy, a higher allowance, or the right to murder. And if they view the parent as not doing well, they can remove the father through a process. We all agree that's lunacy. The true family structure is the father is consecrated by the priest to lead his family to holiness and virtue. A simple phrase I'm going to sum this up with is, if it doesn't work in the family, it will not work in the society. What is a king but the father of nation, and the citizens his children? A king remains more unbiased.
1 minute.
Biased, as he gets to easily dispute, as he's unelected, is not bound by party. He gets to handle the disputes between his citizens as a father does to his children. Better than any elected official. Everything we know about the common good and justice comes from the family. And the Federal Democratic Republic fails us and ours succeeds in it. In my conclusion, I want us to remember the purpose of government, to protect the common good and to lead souls towards the divine good. If St. Thomas Aquinas is right, and that something is good if it achieves its end, then we can not only safely say that the ultramontanist monarchy is a good government, we can also bravely say that the ultramontanist monarchy is the most Catholic form of government. Thank you.
We'll have one question from the audience for each presenter for the opening statements and each rebuttal. Is there a question from the audience? Oh.
I wanted to challenge your analogy of the family to government, and I think it has some good things about it. But within a family, the children aren't able to like govern themselves or live on their own. They really just have to do everything that the parents say and have some authority. But with like adults in a society, the adults are like equal. Like parents and children are not equal, but in society they are. So I guess my question is, how would the children not being able to parent translate into a government?
So I guess the way you're asking is, can I explain how a monarchy better portrays the family? I'm trying to sorry.
Sorry, I guess my question is very clear. But within a family, the children and the parents are not equal, but within a society and government, the governors and
Sure.
governed are.
Sure.
So how does
So you're saying the family is not equal in society there? Sorry, I'm trying to
the children are equal to the parents, but within the government, the people are equal.
That's a great question. It depends on what you mean by equality. We all agree that man and woman and all have equal dignity to each other. One is not higher than the other in either dignity. However, it is a false idea to say we're all equal in authority, we're all equal in rank. In the family system, the children and the parents are not equal. We've seen it pretty clearly in theology of the body, as well as our history, that the father is the head of the house. He is the final authority. But the father also, much better than any other elected figure, if you have one in the family, listens to the cries of the children and his wife better than any other. That's how monarchy portrays it. Again, in the family, you're not equal. I am not equal to my mother. She is the head of my house because I do not have a father. But we also see, but I'm still bound to that. In my family, I will be the head of the house, but I will listen to the plight of my future wife and child because I am sacramentally bonded to her. I am bonded to my children to raise them, but they're not equal in any sense, just as in government. So that's basically how I say it, because again, the entirety of monarchy, temporal monarchy, is based on the family. It is a temporal government ordered to the divine good, just as the family is a temporal sacrament, or it's a sacrament, but it's one for this earth, ordered to the divine good, which is heaven.
Now opening statements from our public judges.
I'd first like to thank Veritas Society for hosting this debate. And I'd also like to remark, what is the government's purpose? I am arguing here that the Democratic Republic is more Catholic because it promotes the common good of And thankfully, our founding forefathers understood that firsthand when they had to deal with King George III. King George III was a tyrant, and so people fled to America to seek a better life and to pursue religious freedom, which in the Catechism, in paragraph 1901, states that the only way for us to follow God's laws freely is to submit to Him freely. And so therefore, I'm terribly sorry. This is my first formal debate. Never done this before. But I'm going to make 3 quick points, then I'll make it short and brief. First point. The American government promotes common good because it provides for liberty. Because of 3 branches of government, it has checks and balances which keep our religious freedom safe from tyranny and oppression. Yes, it makes for the government takes forever to do anything, but thankfully, that also prevents it from intruding on our God-given rights. Second, our forefathers understood this, and so they created the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, which protect these rights. And 3, give me a second to remember. It's written on my paper. Is oh yeah, okay. 3, the ultramontist government. The Pope only, the king is only subordinate to the Pope. Correct. So, what's to prevent the system? We've had corrupt popes. We also had corrupt kings who have separated themselves from the church, who have separated themselves from the Pope. What's to prevent a king from separating themselves from the Pope? Nothing. The king has absolute power. Through an ultramontist government, the Pope cannot. It's not the Pope's job to overlook the rule of other people, like in the sense of physical and political matters. It's the Pope's job to guide us to heaven spiritually and help us live our daily lives as Catholics in a secular world. That is why there's separation of church and state. Where that's why Jesus said, "Give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and give to mine what is mine." Without that separation of church and state, the church will also get corrupted, because human nature, as we know, is fallen. And we cannot have a perfect utopian society on Earth. That's impossible. That's why the monarchy doesn't work. Because no matter what happens, that duo, the Pope and the King, one of them is going to get corrupt. It's human nature. It's going to happen. And what prevents our government from getting corrupted is there's so many elements involved that even if there is corruption, it prevents it from superseding. It prevents the corruption. So yes, our government does have corruption. I will admit that. But the reason that we still have freedom today is because our system is designed to prevent the corruption from crumbling our society. And so therefore, that is why the monarchy won't work and not why our government does. And also, from what I've done in my research, I have not found in existence an ultramontist government. I haven't found it. So, can't live through something that doesn't exist, right?
Jackie. We have a question from the audience for the chat. Doug.
So, in
Sorry.
in your example of the Democratic Republic, would you consider an absolute separation of church and state?
Well,
Because
the
it seems
church-
somewhat implied.
the church's job is not to deal in is not to oversee and rule in political matters. It can help guide us to navigate these political matters, but the church should not be in charge of overseeing a political government, because that would actually open up the church to corruption from its government. Because the church, God is far above governments. We use governments to help people and everything. We use governments to keep order and prevent everything from descending into chaos. So, did I answer your question or no?
Okay. I understand what you're saying. Would you say that there is a separation, an absolute separation of church and state?
I don't think there is an
Do you think the church should have any influence on what the state says on a political?
I say if the church, if our government is doing something against church teachings, then yeah, the church should say something. But the church does not have the political power to override that. So does that answer your question?
So you're saying there would be influence on the state, it's just not
There's
necessarily
influence, but there's a
politically.
separation for a reason.
So influential but not like authority.
Yeah. Jesus did not say to his apostles, go out and be president, go out and be king, go out and be mayor. He never told them to do that. He never told us how to structure our governments. In fact, the church doesn't even support a specific form of government as long as that government provides for the common good of humanity and helps us choose God freely. Then, yeah.
Thank you, Jackie. We'll now have our second opening statement from
In the 15th chapter of the Series on Kingship, the doctor of the church, St. Thomas Aquinas, states the golden thread in the principle by which he and myself regard it, namely, that all ecclesial and civil governments ought to reflect the way in which God orders and structures the universe. Now, we must ask ourselves, how is it that God orders and structures the universe? And what's the church have to say about the relationship between divine governments and human governments? In order to answer this question, we're going to need to consult the source of Catholic theology. No better place to start than the Old Testament. Another doctor of the church, St. Augustine, his tome on the Roman Pontiff, states clearly that God did not make the government of the Hebrews an aristocracy, nor did he make it a democracy. He made it plainly a monarchy. Now, consider King Saul. Saul held absolute power amongst the Israelites. He was subject to no democratic body or senate or no individual. He was subject only to God and his vicar, the prophet Samuel, who was not only a prophet, but was also the high priest, or in Latin we say Pontifex Maximus, of the Kahal, or Church of Israel. This fact becomes even more potent when we realize that it was Samuel, functioning in his pontifical role, who anointed Saul with the oil of chrism and thereby established his kingship. This is a direct continuity with the way in which Christendom operated for 1,000 years, which was the ultramontane system, where the Pope or his representative bishops would anoint kings of Christendom with the oil of chrism and thereby establishing their authority. This is no coincidence at all. This is direct continuity. The word of Pope St. John Paul II, for people of faith, there is no such thing as coincidence. Now, as we Catholics know, the Old Testament is but the foreshadowing of the new and eternal covenant of our Lord Jesus Christ. Our Lord proclaimed the kingdom of God 126 times in the New Testament. Not once did he proclaim the democratic republic of God. This is because heaven is a monarchy. Christ is king. And Christ's church, which is the kingdom of heaven on earth, he knew it would be established best and operate best with a vicar and chief at home. And so he established the papal monarchy, the St. Peter. The way in which the papal monarchy has worked throughout the ages, properly works, with the civil order, can be demonstrated clearly by the letter of Pope St. Gelasius to the Byzantine Emperor Anastasius Augustus in the 5th century. This is where we get the famous two swords doctrine. So Pope St. Gelasius illuminates for us that the church and the state are not separated, but sacramentally united. So there are two swords that rule the world according to the Roman Pontiff: the civil sword and the spiritual sword. The civil sword is summed up in the emperor, and not any democratic figure of the republic. And the spiritual sword is summed up in the papacy. And the civil sword will always be subject to the spiritual sword. This is the basic way in which Christendom operated for over 1,000 years, east and west. Once again, St. Robert Bellarmine, in the same work I mentioned earlier, states that populist government is unfitting for the Christian people. However, populist government is exactly what our opponents tonight are arguing for. So now we have to ask the question, is the American Democratic Republic consistent with the perennial teaching of Holy Mother Church? And the answer is no, it's not. I love America, but it's just not. And I hate to say it, but it's not. There's two ways we can demonstrate this. First, in the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson writes that whenever a government becomes destructive, the people have the right and authority to abolish that government and establish a new one. This is because for Jefferson, one of the founding fathers of our country, government gets its authority from the consent of the governed. However, this flies directly in the face of what St. Paul says in Romans 13. He says that all authority comes from God, and therefore we Catholics must be subordinate to the rulers because they receive the authority from God. Second, the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution states that Congress shall make no laws establishing a new religion. This was further upheld by the landmark Supreme Court case, Everson versus the Board of Education. That document cites Jefferson's letter to some Baptists, stating that the people of America acted well when their legislatures enacted a wall of separation between church and state. Now, let's compare that with Pope Blessed Pius IX's Syllabus of Errors. That document is a collection of 80 heretical propositions, which Catholics are forbidden to adhere to because they're heretical. Among them is that the Catholic religion is no longer, should no longer be the sole religion of the state in our modern era at the expense of other religions. That's heresy. Second is that the church ought to be separated from the state and the state from the church. So there you have it. What's enshrined in the U.S. Constitution is called a heresy by the Roman Pontiffs. More to it, Pope Leo XIII in his encyclical, Immortality Dei, states that if a state or a civil government treats all religions as equal, that takes them out to atheism. So, do that what you will. Now, I'll conclude by saying this.
Okay.
Christianity, Catholicism is inherently imperialistic. We have the commission from our Lord to proclaim the kingship of Jesus Christ, to baptize all nations. No other form of government has made more saints for Christ, more warriors for Christ than the Roman monarchy system. And no government, say perhaps monarchy, has gutted the ranks of all the Lord's army in the Democratic Republic system. Just look at Catholics in this country, right? 70% of Catholics, recent study says, believe in the Veritas. Now, I'll conclude with this. We have heard from, this is another word from Pope Leo XIII. We've heard of the so-called rights of man. Let us hear something of the rights of God. Thank you, and happy Solemnity of Christ.
Thank you, Sam. Is there questions from the audience from the center? Gentleman in the purple.
Yeah, so this is a little, I hope it's challenging, but I want to get more information on ultramontis because I support your position, but in an ultramontis monarchy, where a single ruler wields centralized power, under the guidance of the church, how do you prevent abuses of authority or ensure that the principle of subsidiarity is respected? Doesn't concentrating so much power risk undermining the dignity and agency of individuals and local communities, which are central to Catholic social teaching?
So first thing I would say is that the king, in our conception, is not an absolute monarch, as in the Protestant conception, where he's sort of subject to no man, right? He's subject to the Holy Church, he's subject to divine law, and he's subject to legal law. So if the church, or if the monarch gets out of hand and come to conflict with the faith church, as he often says, you're going to have to choose either between a schismatic or a heretic and the vicar of Christ, right? So, and then secondly, I think the biggest problem that the opposition here has, if we can talk about it a little bit, is a misunderstanding of what the common good is. The common good is directly linked to the divine good. So what's best for every single one of us is to get to heaven, right? It's to know, love, and serve God, right? So when we say, like, the state has to be Catholic, that's in the best interest of every single citizen. Because being able to be a pagan, right, or non-Catholic doesn't actually help us in the end. It's like, would you let your child, like, go, like, run to a hot stove and say, and, like, put their hand on it and say, okay, well, like, I respect your liberty to do so, even though it's going to hurt you in the end. Like, right, do it. So I think that's the biggest problem. We can talk about it a little bit. It's the difference understanding of freedom. So our conception of freedom is freedom for excellence. And their conception is freedom from. So, but in our rebuttals, I think we're going to talk about it a little more. I hope that.
Yeah, that was good.
We'll have our second opening statement from the public sector.
Good evening, everyone. It's interesting because the opposition says that you really can't be a Republican, you can't support the Democratic republicanism, but this actually goes against the views of many of our best popes. You know, Pope Pius XII says that we should support Christian democracy. Pope John Paul XXIII is in favor of Christian democracy. St. Thomas Aquinas, who was in the age, in the medieval era, which was dominated by the monarchy, St. Thomas Aquinas says that the legitimacy of the ruler proceeds from the people. God gives the people the authority to the leader. It's upper, inner, outer. From God to the people to the monarch in the medieval era. So how can we truly say that a democratic system is illegitimate when St. Thomas Aquinas says that by our very nature, by the very nature of power, authority is derived from the people? Would not somebody who disagrees with this statement be a despot? How could we say that these ultra-monist governors are any better than the evil people in the Babylonian Empire and in Persia? These brutes, these killers, these animals. How can we say that the likes of King Henry III of the Holy Roman Empire is any better for putting himself above the Pope? We can't. Furthermore, the common good, as I understand it, is a good which is transmitted to somebody else, a good which is transmitted to somebody else, and doesn't diminish and the overall good doesn't diminish it by transmitting it to someone else. An example of this, peace. Peace is of the common good. Justice is of the common good. Now it's apparent. I can have peace, I can have justice through reason. We don't necessarily have to have divine revelation in order to possess justice, in order to possess peace. So that's the question, actually. That's the question. Our church is really concerned with which state pursues the common good. That's the question. It's not about which state, is more in line. It is about that. But it's another part inherent to our church's belief on which system is better is which state pursues the common good. And I believe that it's apparent. The democracy pursues the common good much better than the monarchy. And I think this is apparent. If you look at our economy, look at something real, like money. Which system is more wealthy? Which system is more rich? Which system is better? If the United States of America were to go against medieval France, who do you think would win? 1,000,000 times out of one. We would win. America would beat France 1,000,000 times. Okay? And that's because the American state is more secure. That's because America has a better ability to pursue the common good. And as a result, we're more rich, we're more wealthy, we're more successful. And that is something that is a part of the good. The lower order concupiscent goods are actually inherent to states. That's something that you really can't take away. Who wouldn't rather live in a more wealthy state than a poor state? Who wouldn't rather live in modern-day America than be a peasant digging ditches in medieval France? I, for one, would 1,000,000 times rather be a citizen of our great republic than be a servant of some despotic king. I think that's apparent. I think that's obvious. Okay, here's something more, okay? So, necessary, and this is a point that Ian made in his opening statement. He said something like, the kingdom is more secure because in the king there's only the one king and he rules the entire state. That's actually technically never even ever true. because you have sort of, in the medieval system, you have this estate system. So you have the nobility, clergy, and you have the Berbers. And so these people, they possess land that the king doesn't. So technically, they're sovereign over that land which they possess. And they use their authority, and they use their levies, the money and the army that they have, and they use them in their own political interest, which is against the interest of the king. So how can you really say that the king is a sole faction if you have these other estates in his own land which are against his own interest? Is that it?
Thank you, Emmanuel. Mark, what we're opening. Mr. Prendergast.
Hello, Mr. Canadian. Our Republic. You said St. Thomas supports popular sovereignty and that the power of the government or derives from the people. Where did you find that in St. Thomas? And how would you reconcile that with the scriptural New Testament, with the New Testament pretty clearly saying that power of government comes from God to the ruler?
What, to the king?
To the ruler, the prince, the civil authority.
Yeah, so I believe that's from, if you look this up, Article 97, question 3, Article 97, question 3. I got it. So Article 97, question 3. And I think, I'm not a theologian, I'll admit that, but I think there are examples. I think Mashiach is an example of the people when they choose the king in Israel, and that proceeds, and so that's an example of how authority proceeds from the people to the ruler, and not the other way around, where it's not upper, outer, inner. It's upper, inner, outer. So Mashiach was, I think, chosen by the people, and that suggests that it's upper, inner, outer.
Thank you. We'll now have opening floor speeches. This is a chance for any one of you to come to the front. You'll have a few minutes to say your piece. We have the first opening floor section.
Look at that haircut.
It seems to me that there's a well-known fact that a lot of the scholastics preferred monarchy as their system of government. That's true. However, if we do look at the underlying principles, though, we do see popular sovereignty as sort of what underlies the legitimacy of the ruler, right? We see that, like you said, in the Summa Theologica, it would be question 97, Article 3. Response to objection 3, actually. And so that's where you'll find it. But it's also in a lot of the other major scholastics. Take Suarez, one of the greatest churches and one of the greatest theologians the church has produced. He laid this out very clearly. He was very big on popular sovereignty. Now, who did the Salamancan school, headed by Suarez at a certain point, influence? Thomas Jefferson. So when we see this sort of opposition placed between Jefferson and the American ideal, at least in that respect of popular sovereignty, as opposed to the church and its teaching, is really phony. Because popular sovereignty, it was based in these theologians, and not just them either. This transmission theory, yes, it is true that God gives the authority to the ruler, but he does so through the common will of the people. It's seen not just in St. Thomas, not just in Suarez, but in St. Robert Bellarmine and in Cardinal Cajetan, the most faithful commenter on St. Thomas. Right? So really, this underlying principle of popular sovereignty is foundational to the church's tradition in terms of politics. Now, at their time, it was monarchies that existed, right? And so they often wanted to pursue that in the form of a monarchy. But in the modern time, I think no one can argue that it's contrary to the truth. The fact that it's much more practical for popular sovereignty to be exercised in the form of a democracy than a monarchy. And since we're trying to work for the common good, you can't see that outside of a particular time and place, right? And so how practical a thing is matters. Because we don't really care about the common good in theory, we care about practice, right? And so in a particular time and place, of course, we would choose our own. And in our own, since a democracy is much more practical to implement, we know that it is in that way more Catholic because it better works for the common good. So we clearly see an issue with this idea that the king only needs the permission of the Pope, not of the people. Because really that is a newer idea. That's not actually what was taught by the scholastics. And so because of that, we do see there's a sort of difference between the family and the government. Because it's not the case for the family. The father doesn't need the permission of his son to rule, right? Whereas the king does need the permission of his people to rule. In the modern day, so does the president. And so clearly this whole analogy of the family and government is good to a degree, but it breaks down when we try to implement it too
30
far.
seconds.
Thank you very much. That's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have another opening floor speech? Gentleman on the right.
He'll go for me in my place.
Okay, that's fine.
So, I'd like to open up real quick with a bit of catechism. 1732 states that freedom, free will specifically, comes from the power in each man. It's the basis of each human being, right? With that basis that we can choose to do good, to do evil, do extraordinary, to do the ordinary. And this whole debate is, quite frankly, very cut and dry, okay? This is all about which government is most Catholic. And right off the bat, let me see that pamphlet right there, sir. Pamphlet right here states that the federal, now we get to discuss federal democratic republics. And they speak honestly. That is a system that derives power from the people. We have the ultramontanist monarchy, very fun name too. That's $5 right there that I give to learn that. But that the king submits to no one except the Pope and his representatives, the legate. The king is only limited to the power of the papacy. Straight up Catholic right there. Alright, so by the end of this debate, it's all about who you're going to vote for that has the most Catholic power. Well, I'm going to give one last thing for the other side, hopefully convince y'all. Maybe not to convince y'all, but to give y'all some food for thought when you come out of this. That for the Federal Democratic Republic, at its core, is a government for the people, by the people, for the people, that supports one thing that I said before in the beginning, which is free will. What is it? What is the number one gift that God gave us? Anyone answer that? It's again, free will. Free will to love, free will to decide for ourselves. So, again, we could see very quickly that we can't, that men can go astray. But as Charles Carroll of Carrollton said, one of our founding fathers, all right, maybe the only Catholic signature, but he found reason, because again, he was going against a king that was not entirely Catholic, but he said that a republic without morals is not going to survive. And he said that specifically to Christian morals.
30 seconds.
So in short, we can see that our governments now can survive because they are built on Christian morals, because they're built with Catholics in mind to live in this society. And if we can decide for ourselves, we can determine for ourselves, then we can, of course, live in this very society. We may not determine who is in charge of our government, who our pope is, spiritually in a theocracy. But that's not what this is about. This is about each man determining their own future. Read Dorothy Day, how she describes distributism, an alternate economy for the capitalist, for the average American. Read, and also maybe for historical reasons, real quick about ultramontanists, because we haven't seen this in theory. We may have the HRE, the Holy Roman Empire, and what we've also seen? Conflict between them. Constant conflict between them. The War of the Keys, Frederick II. I mean, hands down. What this all is about is that ultramontanists could survive. Well, we have seen them, and it's not perfect. No government is perfect. So in the end, which one is going to help us all as Catholics grow? That's why I argue for the Republic.
Thank you. We have another opening floor session. Isaac.
Good evening, everyone, and happy Feast of Christ King, as our monarchy society marks. I wonder if any of y'all remember the gospel text today. I'm going to bring up a verse. John 18:36. Jesus said, "My kingdom does not belong to this world." So I'd like to make a couple of remarks in response to the ultramontist side's opening statements. First of all, you remarked that we have had more saints come out of the ultramontanist government. This is true. However, we've had more time for saints to come out of the ultramontanist government. Our federal democratic republic has been around for 2.5 centuries. Ultramontist governments came out at least a millennium ago? Okay, so, right, so several times now. So yeah, and then also, one more thing. They remarked that for a government to treat all religions as equal is paramount to atheism. I've thought about this. It's not. Really, the difference is pantheism is religion that worships multiple gods. Monotheism is religion that worships one God. Atheism is religion that worships 0 gods. Treating all religions as equal should actually be agnosticism, the recognition that we don't know, and that has to be the starting point. We don't know, which is humility. The root and mother of all virtues has to be the starting point for all philosophy, consider Socrates, to know that you are not wise. And only those who know that they are not wise can come to true wisdom. But now I'd like to remark something I've noticed from the two sides. So I was thinking about this. The Federal Democratic Republic is arguing for their government because it prevents great corruption and oppression. And where is great corruption and oppression most dangerous? In a nation where Catholicism is a minority. Because if a non-Catholic is to somehow come to the top, then we have a big problem, not only for Catholics, but for everybody in the nation. Whereas ultramontanist monarchy works best in a population of Catholic majority or supermajority. So Federal Democratic Republic prevents great oppression and corruption and frees the faithful to, in such a society, spread the faith more effectively. Ultramontanist government, on the other hand, works best in a population of Catholic majority. It secures unity where unity is possible because of the unity of the people that already exists, and therefore frees the faith to spread more effectively. So, there you go. If either side can argue that their side does better in the other side's population, I would be interested to hear that.
Thank you. We have another open floor statement. Gentleman in blue.
due to, I think, the focuses of each side, and just some of the points that I think would be a little stronger on the monarchist side. I would like to start out by criticizing not the whole idea, but the application of reason and the idea that as God governs the universe, therefore we should govern society. Because it's not, I agree that that's the case, but it's not as cut and dry in the matter of how he governs the universe. We can just translate exactly our understanding of how he governs the universe onto specific societies. So I like to put forward the example of a religious sister to the people and use that as an analogy for the nation, or a religious brother, and really anybody under a vow of chastity. I would like to say, God governs the universe in such a way, yes, that he is our king and our father, right? And Christ is our king. That is true. But why does that translate onto us having a temporal king necessarily? Why does that translate onto us in a specific given society having a temporal king? In the same sense that Christ is our bridegroom. Why does that translate that every single woman must have a husband, a just ordinary husband, not Christ? In addition, to Christ. This doesn't translate exactly, and I don't think the church seeks as rigid a uniformity as either side is really projecting onto this. It demands a unity, but unity can be found in a diversity of forms. Not a multiplicity, but a diversity of forms. And I think in certain societies, monarchy might work, in certain societies, republic might work. I think modern times, generally, republics are just a more practical thing, we must work with that. However, I would say, lastly, just to go along with my point of just because we have Christ as our king, we can actually still have him as our king and not have a temporal king, right? In fact, it might actually shine forth clearer as we say that celibacy is a higher calling because we need Christ to be your spouse, right? This is not necessarily this isn't like a cut and dry argument. You can represent different ways of God governing the universe in different ways in which you live your life. We agree that in the case of vocations. We argue that in the case of vocations. We should argue that in the case of governments as well. Lastly, I would just say that to illustrate this point, at first, God did not ordain a monarchy over Israel. He said that I am your king. This was a development and a concession that he later worked with. And then he became their king by having the king that is Christ. His kingdom is not of this world. Keep that in mind and stop being so rigidly uniform.
Thank you. Do we have another opening for a second?
From this side.
I don't think people are sitting by sides, but
I think they are. Everybody else is from over there. We're not, but.
that's actually sort of fun.
So the debate is about what is the most Catholic form of government. So we're talking about theoretical ideals. So I think the argument where it's like, oh well, if this person's the minority or these people are like it doesn't work in this situation, it's not necessarily where we're at hand. We're not arguing, is democracy the best for 2024 America? Is democracy the best for whatever? So I think we should try to look at it more as an ideal. And of course, the ideal is we also need to elect a king. We're all Catholics, so we don't have this problem. There's of course, barring your overnight that. I think one, and maybe I was wrong in her interpretation, but religious agnosticism is not virtuous. It's not a part of the virtue of humility. Humility is submitting your intellect to the truth, which is Catholic religion. And of course, people will but I could be wrong in the interpretation of what I heard, but I don't think the state or us individually should be agnostic towards religion. And I'd be hard pressed to find traditional sources in the church that say that the state should be agnostic towards religion. Also, the end of the government is not making money. The end of the government is virtue. And the point that, F-15s and AK-47s would be steel and trenches, that's, it's kind of absurd, but separation of church and state. St. separation, we don't mean the church and the state are like the Pope is literally ruling. But in Unam Sanctam, the papal bull of Pope Francis VIII, which, I mean, that'd be a whole other argument, especially in terms of like what parts there are, but seems to be reasonably thought of as being infallibly promulgated and infallibly defined. Both swords, the two swords, which we can see in the gospel, there's two swords, and Christ says it is enough. They're both in the hands of the church. So the civil authority cannot, that's what the Pope Pontius, that's not me, that's the Pope Pontius VIII. So to say that,
30 seconds.
yes, there's a sort of division, but there's not a separation, and to say that the church can't tell the state what to do, that the Pope doesn't have any say in the rulers, and that the rulers get their sword from the spiritual power. So the temporal sword is from the church. This is Unam Sanctam. And so, separation of church and state, aside from being kind of radically, do we really think that we don't have religious ideas that are governing our society right now? So I urge us to reject agnosticism, reject a false notion of liberty, and to use our God-given, what I might contend is actually our greatest gift from God is our reason, although that's another topic, but to use that to understand that Christ is King, and find the true liberty which only Christ can bring.
Thank you. Do we have another open content? Gentlemen.
Okay, so, this is an interesting little discussion where we have many things. So the difference between which system of government is the most Catholic. Now, there's many different pejoratives, strange little ways I could pivot around this and add on this and whatnot, but let's get straight to it. Okay, the most Catholic form of government is one that is going to allow Christ to work the most in society. Now, how does that exactly work? If I do, I tell you, because I want you to go out and do it. But sadly, that's been left up mostly to our own devices and to the intercession of the saints to enlighten us. But as we are talking about this debate, which system is going to work, we need to understand subsidiarity as well as the recognition of freedom. Right? So there are two really good systems here when it comes to the notion of subsidiarity. Right? The federal republic, I mean, crying out loud. We have this beautiful federalist system of how subsidiarity could possibly work. The question is only, right, who gets to lead it, right? So do you want a king to lead it, or do you want a federal government to lead it? Okay? Now, when we are debating this, we need to understand that the ultramontanist position does in fact have its weaknesses to it, and there have been developments that have allowed the monarchist system to better suit itself. I mean, we would consider Great Britain, for instance, a democracy, right? Yeah. And there are hindrances on the king's power. But we don't really have any good examples of that in the modern day of an ultramonarchist system working alongside democracies, because all the monarchies I can think of to my head are all run by Protestants. And because of that, they have a completely divorced way of looking at the church. So I'm only throwing all this out to hopefully spark any kind of discussion here, that when we're arguing about the prudence of these systems, that's got to be separate from which is most Catholic, because frankly, to my point, right, we're not getting the most out of a Catholic democracy unless the people are actually Catholic. So if we want to make up for the room that is made up here in the ultramontanist system, we already have a king who's kind of like forcing you to be Catholic. We need to be doing our job in convincing people and bringing the life of Christ to them for the sake of making the nation more Catholic. So, I leave this to all of you with no resolution. I pray you all find it.
Thank you. Well, two more opening
fairy tales, part of what makes them so beautiful is their ability to communicate reality through these iconic images of ideals. And the king is really one of the structural backbones to a fairy tale and how we understand the goodness and beauty of reality and virtue and things like this. I would also like to say, just if you think about what it could have actually possibly been like to live in a monarchy, it's like we have to really use our imaginations, but we can't just assume that every king that ever existed is inevitably going to be corrupt. We have that hope that people can actually be led by their faith and be virtuous, and this is why we have saints like Saint Margaret, Queen of Scotland, Saint David, her son, Saint Stephen, King of Hungary. These were how Christendom was actually able to take root within a society. Prior to Saint Margaret coming to Scotland, Scotland was not Catholic. Catholic was not Christian. It was run by Malcolm III, and he was kind of like a brute of a man, and she brought faith. And by her bringing faith, she was able to lead the whole nation into Christendom. That's not something that a democracy really has the same power to do, because the world is subjected to the spirit of the world. So if we want to talk about the potential of how a corrupt king could mislead the people, a corrupt people who's subjected to the spirit of the world, which is opposed to Christ, does not have the same authority to actually be able to lead people out of error and into truth. Whereas in a monarchy, you can actually make rulings as a good and virtuous king and outlaw false religion, which is incredibly important for people. So, all that to say, if you think about what it could have been like growing up in a monarchy, you would have naturally, as a people, cultivated the virtue of reverence and piety. You would have prayed for the king. You would have known your whole life who was going to be the successor of the king, and you would have prayed for that king as well. Whereas now, in a democratic society, we have this power-seeking political rat race, where there's so much corruption because the question of who's going to rule is something that everybody is fighting over, versus something that you established from the beginning. This is who is going to lead us. This is who we are going to pray for, and it's more of a natural sort of, almost in a way, familial structure to have that reverence and love and respect and honor for your king.
Thank you. This will be our last open forum statement. Good evening.
I want to just add to the discussion tonight, since we're talking about the most Catholic form of government, a little bit of Catholic morality. It's like the best place to turn would be Veritas and Splendor by David too. And when he talks about how he decide if something is good, is if it fulfills its end. It seems like tonight, maybe I took the wrong interpretation, but it seemed like tonight our monarchists were saying that an end of a Catholic monarchy is being able to bring its citizens to union with God. Whereas our Republicans were, the democracy side was saying that it was perhaps the common good, and at worst, even being rich, which our Lord tells us in the gospel how difficult it is for a rich man to get to heaven. So I think we can set that aside. But beyond that point, as Catholics, at least if we want to turn to Veritas and Splendor, the common good is not the end that we should be striving for. And even though we're talking about government, to attach the word Catholic to anything, we need to be turning to these Catholic principles. Because whether we're talking about a Catholic student government, a Catholic household, even a Catholic sports team, we can't just set aside these Catholic morality principles. So we have to recognize that everything that we do as Catholics needs to be oriented towards the end of union with God, of getting to heaven. So I think that was a strong point that they made. But beyond that, in morality, we also have to recognize that the way by which we evaluate something to be good beyond the end is that we know truth. We have to know truth as Catholics, and we have to love the truth. And so conversely, the way that we can err in Catholic morality is, one, if we don't know truth, and then also if we don't love the truth. So a problem when we were priding ourselves on free will, and even in the fact of not knowing in agnosticism, the problem there is that if we have people in the government, citizens, who don't know the truth and are not governed in that way, how in the world are we supposed to achieve the end by which we're ordered? right? So we have to know the truth. So it would be helpful if our government, perhaps a ruler, one ruler, so there would be no division within that government, if perhaps the ruler could tell us what the truth is. And of course, this ruler that is argued tonight by Ian and Sam is one that is ordained by the Pope. So we know that the Pope is going to lead us to truth, and therefore the ruler ordained by the Pope would also be leading us to that truth. So that would be really helpful, I think. Secondly, when we turn to even perhaps our government right now, one of the greatest issues in Catholic morality or morality of the country is the case of abortion, right? And we could argue that some proponents of abortion don't know that abortion is actually wrong, right? They don't realize it's a human being in the case of abortion. But there's also some people who fully know that it is a human being, but they still decide that the rights of the mother are more important. So in that case, they know the truth, but they hate the truth, right? They don't will the truth. All to say, I think the most important thing is that we take into account in this discussion of Catholic morality. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now have one rebuttal from each side. These will be 4 minutes long, followed by one question from the audience. Sorry. No notes cleared. Yes, I believe the one that point was. Yes. We'll have a representative from.
Oh, sorry. Okay. First of all, I want to remark on, what was her name? The one who just talked.
Grace.
Grace. I want to remark on Grace's comment about richness being wrong. Being rich is not wrong, because if you're rich,
That's not what I said.
oh, okay, I'm sorry.
I said that can't be the end of the.
There's a back and forth with the audience.
I'm sorry if I misunderstood this, but, sorry for that. Kings aren't filthy rich. So, so what I was going to say is that in catechism, I believe it's number 396, the only way that we can truly be Catholic is to actually choose to be Catholic. And what better way to do that than a government which allows for this? Our government, yes, our government allows for all religions, but if we start banning other religions in favor of Catholicism, where's that banning going to stop? You might as well just ban Catholicism as well. President, maybe if we got a corrupt president in office and we were allowed to ban religions, then we would ban, then that corrupt president would ban Catholicism on saying that, Protestantism is a true religion. So it's just a radical, honestly, banning religions. Freedom of speech and freedom of choosing to follow God's laws is the only way to be a true Catholic. And that's what our government allows. Another thing. Yeah. So, I'm trying to remember. I can't look at my notes at all. So, back to the system of governments. We are governed by 3 branches: judicial, legislative, and executive, and that prevents corruption from taking into the system. And yes, our country, yes, we are rich, we are wealthy, and that is not a means to an end, obviously. But being wealthy can be helpful, and our country is actually very generous with its wealth, and we've helped other poor countries and poor people, which is very Catholic. God says the poor will always be with us, and this country is helping us. It's helping the poor live a better quality of life. And in the Declaration of Independence, our forefathers wrote that the common good is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Life, which is obviously the right to life. Liberty, which is freedom to choose God United States is not a perfect government. But the difference between a monarchy and our government is that our government, even we've been through civil war. Name one country that's been through a civil war and still come back together. That is a miracle in itself. We have gone up and down, but we've always come out. It's always ended up being okay. We've always ended up being all right. Our system protects the common good, and that's why it is more Catholic.
We'll now have a rebuttal from our line side. Oh, I'm sorry. We'll have a question for the Senator.
Yeah.
Is there a question for the?
Yes.
Yes, Joseph.
All right. So, have you ever heard of religious tolerance?
Could you say that again?
Religious tolerance. Have you ever heard of it?
I don't think so.
Okay. So the idea of religious tolerance, which is actually been taught by the Catholic Church, is the idea that we don't allow other religions to promote their belief, and that is to try to convert people publicly, but we allow them to practice their religion privately. But the Catholic Church is the only faith that can be promoted and practiced publicly.
You're here.
Would you support that?
Well, where did you get the source?
Vatican II.
Vatican II? Okay. Where is it Vatican II?
I forget which document exactly. But I can pull it up for you and get back to you at any time.
So, I'm sorry, could you restate that again so I can make sure I'm answering this correctly?
Repeat the question.
Yeah, could you repeat the question so I make sure I answer this correctly?
All right. Would you support religious tolerance?
Can you restate what that is? I don't believe I fully
Okay. Religious tolerance is the idea of having other religions practice their faith privately. They cannot publicly. They cannot practice their faith publicly, and they cannot try to convert other people to their faith publicly. Only the Catholic faith can be practiced publicly.
Okay. But the government. But are you saying? Are you?
They're not. They're not banished. Like you can be a member of that faith, but you cannot spread your faith, so to speak.
Okay. So that's Vatican II, but that has nothing to do with the government system promoting this, right?
No. It's a government law. Would you support religious tolerance?
Religious tolerance. Well, like I said before, religious tolerance. If we don't. Now, I don't want to argue with Vatican II at all.
Okay.
I don't want to argue with Vatican II. But all I'm going to say is that religious tolerance is allows, like I said before, it does allow for the if we start banning other religions to practice their faith in public or practice at all, then what's to stop the government from banning Catholics and Catholics from practicing their faith as well? The point of in the Catechism it says that paragraph 390, I think it's 396, it says that the only way to be in true friendship with God is through free submission. So if we allow other religions, they have the option to choose God. But if we ban them, then we automatically take away that option. So that's why I say, yeah, that's my answer.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, we will have our rebuttal from our side.
All right, so there's a lot here. First thing I'm going to say is with regards to St. Thomas Aquinas. So St. Thomas was a monarchist, and this can be found clearly in De Regio, page 12 and 13. Page 12 it says that government of one is going to be most valuable and most useful for a government. One government of many. And actually, page 13 says if there is a government of many, it's only going to work if all the heads agree. And as we can see, they're all the dual authority agree. And as we can see today, our masters don't agree with each other. So I'm going to rule that out. Okay. Secondly, this is really, really important with regards to religious freedom. One of the church does not defend the idea of religious freedom that you guys are promoting here tonight. So what we need to realize here is that Dignitas Humanae, which is what influenced the catechism verses you're talking about, Dignitas Humanae is not defending the right to pursue, false religions. It's not defending the right to pursue false religions or establishing them. Dignitas Humanae is defending the perennial Catholic teaching, which states that people who are not Catholic cannot be coerced from the state into the Catholic religion. If you want more on this, look at the work of Dr. Thomas King. He's from University College London. He does great work on this. So yeah, more with that Bishop Wilhelm von Kepler, who was a moral theologian in the 19th century, his work is very influential on the encyclical of Pope 13. He says that moral freedom is not an excuse to commit evil. So like in our system, Satan worship is no, that's not gonna work because it does not work for common good. So in our system, what we're saying is that other religions would be allowed to exist. So if you look at the history of the Monarchy system, King Baldwin IV in Jerusalem actually allowed for Muslims to live in this country. Actually, Muslims came to the King of Jerusalem to live there because they knew that the Catholic government would protect their local rights and liberties, right? Also, King Ferdinand of Spain protected Jewish peasants from being forcibly baptized by Catholic peasants. Okay? This is the perennial Catholic teaching. So what in our government, what it means is that the Monarchy system will give public funds to charities, churches, entertainment outlets, media, all these different things to propagate the spreading of the gospel. That's what it's about. It's about the spreading of the gospel amongst the people. It's not about forcibly converting anybody. It's about spreading the gospel. The Monarchy system does that much better. Third point. You guys mentioned that the kings of Christendom are tantamount to Persian despots, right? Okay, so that's ridiculous. But let's just compare our government today, right? What can be more tyrannical than the government, the federal Democratic Republic, the government, thinking they have the authority and the right to redefine what marriage is, redefine what human life is, without popular vote? Without popular vote, so that's what you guys are all about, popular vote. They did it, you out of it. Let's see. Okay, more two, you guys cited Charles Carroll, Catholic Sound Declaration. All right, well, so Maryland, started as a Catholic colony, but they didn't take their Catholic faith seriously. They didn't evangelize. English Protestants came in, established penal laws. The guys who founded the colony as Catholics apostatized and became Protestants. Compare Charles Carroll, right, with his cousin, Bishop John Carroll. Bishop John Carroll was basically the man who started the Americanist heresy, which is this idea that America is different. We don't have to be like the rest of the Catholic world. We are unique. And that's actually a heresy that got condemned by Pope Leo XIII. It's his encyclical, Testament of the Midwest. So that's pretty cool. So really, it's a lot here, but it's kind of what I got to say about for a while.
Thank you, Sam. Is there a question for Zach? Yes, John.
I'm going to kind of ask you a question that sort of might help you in a way talk more about the federal Democratic Republic. And I'm going to ask you a question that maybe they have challenging to answer too. In the federal Democratic Republic, what do you think, if you were a federal Democratic Republic yourself, how would the majority, since the majority of the people hold all the power and determine the laws and the policies, how do you ensure that there are moral truths, such as the sanctity of life, the dignity of marriage, the care for the poor, that is upheld if the majority of the people aren't even religious themselves? So what would you say to them?
Okay, first thing we would say here is that our Monarchy system is not against representative government. It's not against the ability for people to be sovereign over their local rights. It's not against that. What it's against is the separation of powers. So with your question, is that how we would do that is it has to come from evangelization, right? So like the Monarchy system won't work if it comes from top down. Like we would never say, all right, we're just going to come in there with guns blazing and forcibly baptize everybody, right? So in order for America to ever be a godly monarchy, we're going to have more Americans be Catholic, right? So it all starts with evangelization, right? So that's kind of my question. So you're saying from the if we were
so I think I need to better clarify my question. Is like, do you think? How would you say to them, like? Actually, no. I would say, do you think that their system risks subordinating divine law to human opinion?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's very in many ways.
And how would you?
And the worst part is it affects how Catholics think. So there's so many Catholics now who no longer think like Catholics, right? And that's shown in Pew Research about Catholics don't believe in presence, Catholics don't believe abortion is wrong, Catholics don't believe marriage is wrong, all these different things. That's what affects. So it's the principle of indifferentism and relativism that seeps into the culture, and that's the root of that American heresy, which that's what we gave. We started with Catholics promoting this false understanding of religious freedom and liberty that the church has never protected. Catechism doesn't permit that we didn't protect it. I mean, Catechism 2 in Monarchy actually says every person is obliged to become Catholic. To come to the one true church, the Church of Christ, one Church of Christ. It says that. I mean, yeah.
Thank you, Sam. We're now going to go into this cross-examination round where we'll have two pairs of people come up at 15 minutes, just talk back and forth. There will be no questions after these. We'll now have our first pair come forward, and we'll have three.
I can take it.
Oh, I can start.
I may be extreme, I'm so Of course.
I would like to first ask a question. How is the government, your partner saying, Sam, how is the government, how is the alternative conference government represented when the king only answers the Pope?
Sure. So we can actually look, if we want to judge our system of government, we have to look back to the Catholic Church. Subsidiary, which is local rights protected, is perfectly demonstrated in the Catholic Church as the papal monarchy, as described by not only Catholics today, but actually far back. The Pope has absolute authority and power over the Church. The only thing he cannot change is dogma and doctrine.
No, but how is it represented?
How is it represented?
Representative is
Sure.
when you have the people
Well, sure.
having to say in the
Well,
government.
one, again, as you've heard, our society the history of Ultramontane monarchy. You said that you have not found a single one. That's not true. The only, actually, one of the only kingdoms I can think of that was not Ultramontane in its history was England. It was made clear from the beginning that England submitted to Veritas. However, in St. Louis IX France, St. Henry II, Holy Roman Empire, St. Margaret's Scotland, and so on, the estates, or they had a lot of their local liberties, would call the diet. The king would actually call the diet. And these different estates, which are basically classes of people, the third being bankers, artisans, the second being nobility, and the third being clergy, would come together and express their grievances. That's been through the history of Ultramontanism, and how the kings always had the final authority, as stated in St. Louis IX.
So how is that represented?
How is it represented?
Yes.
Well,
how is it represented when the king has final authority and does not allow the people?
Well, if
have
I
a
may
say?
shoot back.
So if the king were to decide for abortion to be legal in the government,
Sure.
there's no way that the people could
Can I
overturn
ask another
that.
question? How can we have representation in the Catholic Church if the Pope has absolute authority and power?
I'm sorry, just.
How can we, I'm going to shoot this back to you, answer another question. How can we in the Catholic Church have good representation if the Pope over any council holds absolute authority and power? Our system is based on, well, for example, the Pope, as stated in Vatican I, has more authority than a church council, has more authority than any person in Christendom. He's the only bishop who can proclaim something infallibly. Again, our system of subsidiarity
Yes, but
is
only
based on
only infallibility when it comes to church doctrine,
church
45
doctrine.
seconds.
Well, then well,
not opinions.
so one, I'll say this, if you look at the history of Christendom, again, as a father mitigates between his children, who he is born and raised, he is actually less biased than elected officials, because again, elected officials, as we have seen in our system, are prone to bribery.
But the Pope is also elected.
The Pope is
elected by the bishops.
Well, it's like you said, Jack, which like you believe, Jack, the
Why-
papacy is an exception. The papacy will not be destroyed by election like our nation is.
No, but why would that? We've had elected corrupt popes.
And we've had popes who have crowned dynasties itself. Again,
But
the
that
monarchy
no,
is
but
the
we've
perfect
had
example of
corrupt popes, that's
temporal
the point.
authority.
We've had corrupt popes.
True. And we've also had temporal kings. We're not arguing our system is perfect. We're arguing
No,
it's much better than yours. It's true.
No, but why is it much better than ours? When our system
Because our
prevents
system orders
the
towards
most,
the
our
truth.
system is designed to prevent the most corruption.
And our system is meant to order, as done throughout history, towards divine good and the common good. Because monarchy throughout history.
But how?
Okay, sure. Can I give you an example? Okay, sure. You talk about religious freedom. Sam brought it up clearly. Under King Baldwin IV's kingdom, he allowed Muslims and Jews to worship. According to Catholic teaching, they cannot be coerced. Same with St. Louis IX. Fun fact, it was St. Louis IX, King of France, who ended trial by ordeal and who brought innocent until proven guilty. Same with St. Henry II, and so on and so forth. That is how it's done. These monarchs have portrayed it much better, and they have led towards the divine good. In fact, again, Muslims and other religions came to our king. If we're going to argue historically here, because again, I've given you historical examples, what you're saying about a corrupt king ruining it because of coercion to the faith is simply the majoritively unhistorical. Again, what king, really, King Ferdinand, going against the Catholic peasants who were forcibly baptizing Jews and fighting them with his own soldiers? King Baldwin IV, whose religious tolerance was so great that Saladin, the Muslim leader, decided not to kill the Catholics because of how great King Baldwin IV was. St. Henry II,
I'm sorry. That'll be. Now I'll have our secretary.
So, in December of 2020, a group of Satanists went to the Capitol building in Iowa State Capitol building, and they put up a figurine of Satan next to a nativity set of our Blessed Lord. A Christian and a U.S. Navy veteran from Mississippi heard about this. He drove up with Crusader spirit, right? Drove up to Iowa, right? Made the long haul, went to the Iowa State Capitol building, and he destroyed and toppled that satanic setup. So here's the bad thing. Mr. Cassidy, Michael Cassidy, he was charged with a felony, a misdemeanor, a felony in a hate crime under Iowa state law. Right? And it was because the people who set that up were legally permitted to do so by the establishment clause. Right? So federal government law assisted this Iowa state law. Okay, so my question to you was the Iowa state government right in condemning Mr. Cassidy? And were they right in condemning Mr. Cassidy? And should they have that right to do so?
That's the thing. No system is perfect, and people who support democracy say this all the time. No system is perfect. And there are errors in the current legal structure of America, but that's exactly the thing. I'd rather have small errors in the legal structure than have a potential monarch who controls the entire legal structure and can do whatever he wants. So essentially, if we have a monarch who's in control, he can make the state religion Satan. And that sounds ridiculous, but we live in an era which is dominated by Satanists.
In our system, he could not make the state religion Satanism because he's not an absolute ruler. He has to listen to the church, the Pope, the blind law, not the law. So, with that being said, is it in the common good of the country to promote, to allow Satanists to set up a sect just like that? Like, what does that do? What does that do? Like, good for not only the Satanists who did it. Like, how does that help them towards heaven? How does that help anybody else in heaven towards heaven? Those in this country who like allow you.
I don't think that's in the social.
Right. So that's the point. Is that the laws of our country itself do not promote evangelism. They do not promote the Catholic faith. They're not the most Catholic. This is the exact thing that's under debate tonight. Is that what is the most Catholic form of government? And if you live in a government where you're allowed to go do something as blasphemous as, like, you can't argue that's Catholic. So the laws of our country and the very principles of our founding are not Catholic. They allow people to do this.
So I believe that Satanism is an anti-religion. So the natural existence of Satanism opposes Christianity. So I think if we do have a real legalistic interpretation of the founding fathers, I do believe that it would outlaw Satanism. Obviously, our current legal structure. And when I said we could have a monarch, and the monarch would, and because of our current age, how many Satanists there are, how much power, and it's true. Like, think about how much power these evil people have. Like, think about how much power someone like Klaus Schwab has, or Larry Page, the CEO of BlackRock. Think how evil these people are. Jeffrey Epstein. Think how much power these people have. Like, the question is, it's like, if we had a monarchy in today's society, if we were to establish a monarchy, who would be the monarch? Somebody with a lot of power. Who has power in our current age? evil, demonic people who, but we wouldn't have stopped, but then it's not, the point is it's not pragmatic.
Well, the point is they never became king in the first place. It is that an open monarchy system would never, ever allow people to go desecrate the space where our blessed Lord.
But in a way, yeah, because the Pope doesn't have political legitimacy.
Yes, he does.
No, he does not. He doesn't possess the economy, and he doesn't
Okay,
possess
the authority, he has the authority talk, but you're gonna have the military,
yeah.
martial.
So it's not pragmatic. The ideal is pragmatism.
The question is whether it's
It is true.
We're now going to have our closing statements from both sides, starting with the Republic side. Emmanuel. You'll have 5 minutes.
Yeah, and I'd like to bring up the question of pragmatism again. I was going to address this in the rebuttal, but I didn't. So this is the question I was going to ask. I was going to say, hey, look, do you think that the ultramontist system is the best system possible for the spread of Catholicism? And you would answer yes. I would follow up with the second question. Well, wait a second. Wouldn't a system where the Pope is the monarch be a much better system than just some guy is the monarch? Obviously, that's not pragmatic. We can't have the Pope be the ruler of every single nation. So naturally, to Catholic doctrine, there has to be pragmatism. That's the question. Are we being pragmatic? Are we being realistic? Or are we living in a dreamland? Okay? I too would love to live in the Garden of Eden where we don't have original sin. I too would love to live in my own imagination where I can be anyone. And I can do anything, and I can be any place, anytime, anywhere. But we live in America. We live in a real place, in a real time, where realistic matters. And what's real is that the democracy works, monarchies don't.
Here, here.
The monarchy was a system created in a much different era. This system was created when we don't have the technology of today. The technology of today, namely the printing press, allows for much greater centralization. We can have a much greater centralized state, which allows for a much stronger policy than we did under the monarchy. Because we have such danger in the hands of the sovereign, we have to ensure that he who is sovereign doesn't make error. If one person has the discretion over the entire state, that means that if he makes a bad decision, if he is lead to error, if he's corrupted, that means that the entire state falls. This was the exact idea which led James Madison to write our Constitution today, which is the idea that we should have not just one person govern our state, but we should have the people govern our state. And obviously, the people aren't making every decision. The representatives from the people, their powers are going to be separated. Okay? Furthermore, I believe that it's just not real to have an absolutist monarchy. It just doesn't exist. You can say there's examples of monarchies historically, but they're not absolutist because, here's the perfect argument, they're not absolutist because there's autonomy. How is it in the interest of a monarch to have my nobilities have the potential to revolt against me? Wouldn't I want my nobility to have no chance of revolting against me ever for any reason at all? And that's the exact system of every single monarchy in all history. There's a potential that those under the monarch can disobey them. So no system actually has ever been absolutist, ever. besides from the kingdom of heaven. So yeah, that's another point here. Yeah, and okay, here's another one. So Thomas Jefferson, so our founding proceeds from natural law, and this is in line with the Catholic Church doctrine, which surrounds natural law in Aristotle. And this is because in the Declaration of Independence, I can't say that word, in the legal document that allowed us separation from the corrupt kingdom of Britain, there's this line, which is that it is self-evident that man is equal. All men are created. It's self-evident that all men are created. The word self-evident means apparent apparent in of itself. So that means that it is a good in of itself that men are made equal. And so this is consistent with the idea of natural law, which is that there's a teleology, that there's a purpose to our existence. Furthermore, there's another problem with the Pope having leverage over the monarch. Here's a problem with that. If the Pope has leverage over the monarch, okay, so if the Pope has leverage over the monarch, this means that the practice, basically this means the practice of simony can exist. So if the Pope has leverage over the monarch, then, and this was the whatever, but the practice of simony can exist. Leverage over the monarch.
Thank you, Emmanuel. We'll now have our last closing statement from Mark.
Third, I want to challenge anyone here. Find one saint doctor of the church who supports the system of government. Second, we've heard a lot about the corruption of the monarch, and I want to address that. And the traditional Republican argument is a monarch at its best is better for souls. A monarchy at its worst is the worst for souls. I want to address this and link back to the last debate we did, the Trump debate. The entire argument for voting for Trump was based on the lesser of two evils. In our system of government, we have to choose, and every single person in that room, I have good doubt, felt morally compromised and spiritually compromised to some degree. However, so in our system of government, we have four options. Today, someone who will allow the right to baby murder, someone who will codify baby murder, a person who has no chance of winning, who may be good, or doing nothing at all. And again, I want to address, if our government gets worse, how, even still, less souls will be damned. Consider in an ultramontane monarchy, the king has final authority except for the pope. There have been cases where the kings have gone against the pope. And by the way, that fact that the pope has no military power, that's not true. Consider the interdict against Henry IV, where Henry IV was about to be invaded by the papal, and that he literally excommunicated every single person in the empire. Henry IV, the most powerful Holy Roman Emperor and the most corrupt, literally begged on his knees in brown robes in front of the Pope's palace for 3 days. Same with other French kings, as a matter of fact. But let's say there's a tyrant, much so bad he makes someone like Philip IV blush. It's still better for souls. Do you know why? In our system, I'm going to give an analogy. In our system of government, currently you have the option between a spicy, greasy Chick-fil-A chicken sandwich and a spicy, greasy McDonald's Big Mac. But in an ultramontane monarchy, there isn't this lesser of two evils in moral compromise. In an ultramontane monarchy, the choice is made for you. In the analogy, you either pick between a schismatic heretic and the Pope. In fact, to give this an analogy, in an ultramontane monarchy, the choice is made for you. You either choose between a full buffet and a bottle of poison. That's not done in our republic. Also, again, I have seen many quotes by the founding fathers, but barely any, except by one person, great job, from the saints. But again, we're talking about what gets souls to heaven. Again, we agree no system of heaven is perfect. But which one does better? And in the words of one person I've heard from this week, democracy is the worst, democracy is the best form of government except for all the others. It was creative, I didn't think of it. That was someone else. Again, in our system of government, there's a lesser chance for sin. And again, the heresy of Americanism is not just America's different. It says America's different, that we should separate fully church and state. And again, I have not heard a single statement on a statement, not context by us, about separation of church and state, from the Vatican, from the church fathers, from the popes, from the doctors of the church. Every single saint, pope, and church father is on our side. And I'd like to give a final thing. I want to steal their argument just a little. Pope Leo XIII, in his policy called the Rally Move, a pastoral approach, said that French Catholics should not try to reestablish the monarchy, but should instead work with the democratic process. Again, this was a pastoral approach. It was not infallible. The only magisterial thing is that Catholics can participate in democracy without sin, and he never argued they could not. But guess what? This policy failed. This policy has failed since the beginning of Catholics trying to keep with the basic process and working it. All we see is the heresy of modernism, of lukewarmness in Catholics. As one pope called it, the heresy of heresies, which is damning more souls today than any others. That is in the Federal Democratic Republic and the European systems that try to base it off of us. In fact, this policy, after it was enacted, the Rally Move, trying to work in the Christian system, try to not establish it slowly. One, after this, the Combs Law was passed, which allowed the state said we can take the church property from the church, we are superior to the church, and in fact, bishops are no longer in charge of their cathedral, except the lay Catholic organizations founded by the French government. It was so bad that Pope Leo XIII's successor, St. Pius X, completely revoked it and said that Catholics should resist the French liberal government by all legal means. And guess what? There was a spike in Catholicity. The French government decided to disband the Combs laws, and we can see the same thing done in America if we just get our crap together and realize that we need Catholicity in our faith. And guess what? We need a government that acts on it. Again, the church fathers saying when it comes to separation of church and state are on our side, not theirs. Now, again, in our system, and again, I've already said historically, and I actually have Muslim sources which quote this. I promise. Muslim sources talking about how Muslims went to the kingdom of Jerusalem. French sources, French non-Catholic sources saying how Louis XIV established that great big idea of innocent before proven guilty. I want to say one thing. What happened in France is no coincidence. Catholics should not be okay with settling in this life for the lesser of two evils. We need to strive for the highest good. Lesser of two evils is only by necessity, but we can go more. We are not arguing for theory. We are arguing for ideal. The Catholic faith is the ideal, and we should fight for that. And the best system is ultramontanist monarchy, which we have shown not only leads more souls to heaven, but at worst damns less than the Federal Democratic Republic. And lastly, I'll just quote simple things we've heard all night. There's a reason we call Jesus Christ the King of Kings and not the President of Presidents. Because if we did call him the President of Presidents, less people would take him seriously than they already are today, and that can't be done anymore. Jesus is King, and it's through the entire history of Christendom, thousands of years of monarchy compared to our system, which is crumbling at the seams. Our system defends itself very well and promotes the Catholic faith. Happy solemnity of the feast of Christ, the King of the universe, and Ave Christus Rex.
Democratic fashion.
Y'all want a crown, Andrew?
We're now all going to vote on which side we thought was the more convincing of the two. And you can, the idea being like, they could make better arguments, or you would generally just believe them themselves. Either one of those. Alright, we'll do first, if you think the Democratic Republic side is more convincing, please stand and raise your hand. Okay, thank you. If you think the monarchy side was more convincing, may you please raise your hand. Okay, thank you.
Before
before I tell you what the votes were. Oh, yes,
Oh,
right.
he abstained.
Is there anyone here?
Both are fine. Both fine.
I played 17 votes to 32 votes. And several abstaining. Monarchy side. Quickly end in prayer. Glory be to the Father,
to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end.